La repregunta. Matt, you have done very serious allegations against the model that the Imperial College produced in order to forecast the outcomes of the pandemic coronavirus, not only in England, but also in the United States. Which are these allegations?
My co-author and I, David Davis, is a member of Parliament and I'm a member of the House of Lords. And we think it's important that serious questions are asked because we have relied upon this model for policy in the UK, but also it has been influential elsewhere in the world. We now know a little bit more about how the model was put together, the computer code behind the model, and it is, on the whole, not very high standard computer code, we have learned, and very vulnerable to assumptions that might be wrong. And this might be why it has been producing numbers that don't seem to match the epidemic, even in countries such as Sweden, where there has been much less in the way of a lockdown of society.
Mm-hmm. This model had forecasted for the United States 2 million dead people in case the United States didn't decide to impose lockdowns. And in the case of Great Britain, they spoke about 550,000 dead. And there is the main character in this story is the guy, the epidemiologist, Neil Ferguson, who was responsible of the forecasting. Who is he and which is his record?
Neil Ferguson is a professor of epidemiology at Imperial College, and he has been involved in the forecasting of diseases before. And in the case of the foot and mouth epidemic in 2001 in the UK, his forecasts were responsible for a policy of slaughtering more than 6 million cattle, and they were heavily criticised by a formal inquiry afterwards as being too crude and too simplistic in the way they forecast what might happen to cattle. He then went on to forecast diseases including the mad cow disease, BSE, and in the early 2000s, when there was no sign of a significant increase in human cases of this disease, he still forecast 136,000 dead. In fact, only 177 people died. Mm-hmm. And in the case of swine flu and bird flu, he also forecast very large numbers of dead, and this didn't happen. So he has a track record of forecasting more deaths than happens, and this isn't just because of actions that are taken. He will say that this is because his job is to point out possible worst-case scenarios, but often these are presented not as worst-case scenarios, but as realistic possibilities. There are very big differences in terms of the transmission of the virus between different segments of the population. Mm-hmm. And the model doesn't take this heterogeneity of the population into account in a sufficient way.
I would like to review the critics you posed against this model. On this model, you said in the article appearing in the Telegraph, the code is deeply riddled with bugs. What does it mean?
A bug in computer terminology is a mistake that has to be corrected somewhere else in the code. This is not my view. I was quoting the view of coding experts, mm-hmm. Who said that this code is not clean of problems. Now, the problem is that if a bug leads to a different outcome, that can be magnified and produce a different result. One of the ways you counteract this in modelling is to annotate your model very carefully so that you know which part of the model is producing which effect. And this apparently had not been done very fully in the model. I think the main point of our argument is to say that this is an imperfect piece of mathematical guesswork. It should not be invested with a great deal of confidence. And some people would say, yes, no, we didn't intend it to be used with great confidence. But that is the way, I'm afraid, that the political system has taken it as a very hard and probable prediction.
How is the proper way to use a model like this? Is this useful to predict the outcome of a pandemic or of an epidemic and then produce a policy regarding these outcomes?
Models are useful. They should be used, but they should be used as thought experiments to envisage what might happen under some circumstances, but they should not be given great confidence, and their output should not be treated as evidence. It's important that model results are challenged by other models. The way science works.
Last question regarding this issue. The Sweden government has also tested the effectiveness of this model to predict their outcomes in Sweden, aren't they?
Yes, Sweden is a good test case for this model because it was used to make specific predictions for Sweden, and Sweden did not impose a compulsory lockdown like most other countries in Europe. And therefore, the outcome in Sweden should have been roughly what the model said, which was several tens of thousands of dead people in Stockholm County alone. In fact, the number of dead is much smaller than that, and only 3,000 dead in the whole country. So that does seem to be a good test that the model was over-predicting deaths as a result of its flaws.
Bueno, el modelo